Hi, welcome everyone. This is Dawn Johnson. I'm the broker and owner of Backstage Realty, and today I have with me Charlotte Doe.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. And today we wanted to do a video to talk a little bit about the security deposit process. And in this particular video, we are going to talk a little bit about the security deposit process for an owner. And this is something that Charlotte knows quite a bit about. So we're going to jump in. We're kind of doing this as a conversation session with a little bit of question and answer. So I will start, Miss Charlotte. Let's kind of go over some of the basics. The tenant gives notice. We notify the owner, and then we increase the reserve amount that they're holding in that final month. Why do we do that?
So yes, we increased that because at that point, we're going to have some vacancy. And we need to set up utilities for the property. We may need to do some cleaning. It depends on what the tenant has done and hasn't done. And then from there, we need to pay our vendors. So we need those extra funds to take care of some of those.
Well, what if, we've got a tenant that's moving, we've already secured a tenant. We know we've got somebody moving in next week. Why do I have to have utilities on?
So utilities need to be on. I need to go in and do my property inspection. I need the lights on. I may need water, multiple reasons. And so it may be a short amount of time, but we still need those utilities there. And
And
if I find something that, if the cleaners didn't do a great job, I need them to come in and touch up. They need water, they need power.
yes, and of course, all of our utility companies, even though they know we're a company and we do this all the time, they always charge us a deposit per property.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
All right. So what does that timescape look like? So the tenant has now vacated. It's the last day. Are you going by that day, the last day of their lease to do your inspection? What does that time frame look like?
So we make sure that the last day that they've left everything for us, keys, remotes, any receipts, um, it's contactless. We ask them to leave them at the property and to notify us that they're gone. If that's on a Friday, I'm there by Monday. If that's during the week, I'm there within 3 days to do my inspection.
And this may not be the only inspection you're doing, right? Most of our move outs tend to be at the end of the month. So, we typically say 3 business days because we may be doing 10 move
Multiple.
out inspections.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
So, um, let's talk a little bit about what we are looking for when you go and do that inspection. So we do these as property managers. Several of our inspections are done by staff, right? That are just looking for compliance issues or maybe, checking on condition age of systems, how a lawn's doing, if there's any wood rot, things like that. But
Yes.
we do our move out inspections, and this is off script. This is not on the list. But what is the purpose between having the licensed property? What are some of the benefits of having the licensed property manager doing that inspection versus just another staff member?
So because we're not just looking for damages, um, we as property managers, it's our property. We know the tenants and how they were in the property, and we know our owners. And we want to see, first there, damages, yeah, we're looking for those. But we also want to see, is the carpet wore out? Is it time to repaint? Is there any wood rot? Are there anything that needs to be done um, to make the property more rentable? And those are things that property managers need to be in the property for.
Plus, I find that it's really good also if we ever have a tenant that negates something, because there's a legal, I feel like we really have a duty to both sides, both the tenant and
Yes,
the owner when it comes to, splitting the baby. And I'm sure you've heard me say a million times, we have to be Solomon,
yes,
and split the baby, because for an owner, we're never, deducting enough. And for a tenant, we're always, just out to get the money.
right.
And so we sometimes have to negotiate that after the fact, right?
Yes, yes,
And it's a lot easier to negotiate that when you have personal knowledge of it and not
yes,
just hearing something secondhand.
right. Or just a picture or a video. Putting ourselves in there is important.
And that's a good point of like how you document those items. So
Yes,
you take pictures and videos, and so
yes,
you're covering all of the legal bases there.
right. Yes.
Um, all right. Maybe you want to ask this one, number
Yes,
four.
yes, I would love to ask this one, Dawn. Let's talk about responsibility. Let's go through some of the normal scenarios. Um, and talk about making decisions and splitting the baby. Whose responsibility is this, tenant or owner? Um, cleaning, cleaning, carpets, the carpets are dirty. There's food left in the refrigerator. What are we
That's
doing?
a great, you lobbed me a good warm up one there.
Yeah,
That is obviously tenant responsibility. When they vacate, they are supposed to leave the property clean. They're supposed to have the carpets professionally cleaned and give us a receipt for that.
yes,
And we go through and do an inspection, and I won't say it's exactly white glove military style, but it's pretty close. We're checking baseboards, we're checking around toilet bases,
yeah,
we're checking light fixtures inside the house for bugs and debris, blinds for dust, and
yes,
we want to make sure that it's free of all the dirt and hair cabinets and drawers. We want to make sure that they've been cleaned and wiped out, and that all the appliances have been pulled out,
yes.
and cleaned behind those. So it's a pretty thorough inspection.
What about this one? What about the yard? The grass is overgrown, flower beds need tending, bushes are out of whack.
Again, that is tenant responsibility, and part of our move out process is notifying the tenant that that needs to be taken care of within 2 business days of their vacating,
Yes,
so that we've got a nice fresh surface to work with. Now, one caveat to that is things don't stop in a vacuum once the tenant moves out. So if it is spring or summer or even early fall, we may have to have that grass cut again. So a lot of times owners are like, well, I thought they were supposed to have left the grass cut. Yes, but your tenant didn't move in for 10 days. Now, that may seem like a short period of time, but if you let grass grow for 10 days, you may have knee-high grass if it's, May, June, July. So that does not alleviate the ongoing responsibility.
yes, absolutely. So what about fresh mulch? Like to
So
freshen up those beds and
yeah, and this is something that Charlotte and I both feel very strongly about. It's easy for owners to understand that when we first take a property, they want to have that curb appeal, and they like to get it all fresh and beautiful looking. And then kind of in their mind, once they turn it over and give it to us, like it stays that way. As if we were putting a little time capsule dome over it. However, mulch is really only good for 1 or 2 seasons. And if you want to keep your property having that great curb appeal and keep it looking nice, want to keep the weeds down, things like that, it's important that the owner take care of those types of items. So there may be some additional stuff that isn't tenant responsibility, like replacing mulch or pine straw,
yeah,
or maybe some tree trimming, things like that, that are yard work, but they're not tenant responsibility.
yes. Good point. Can I ask you a couple more?
Sure.
So the front burner, so tenant's out, front burner on the stove doesn't work. Is this tenant or is this a normal repair?
So that's really going to depend. Now, most owners automatically, because it's during the turnover, want to assign that repair to the tenant. Um, However, what we try to do is we've noticed that that doesn't work. When we come back into the office, we do a bunch of different things. We actually have to think through the process of how did it get damaged? If it's somebody dropped something when they were moving, they were taking stuff out
Yes.
of the cabinets and something dropped on the surface, then yes, 100% that's going to be a tenant expense. If it's something that it quit working the week that they were moving out and they hadn't been using the stove because the military movers had come and packed all their dishware,
Okay.
and so they just didn't think about, getting a work order put in to have the repair done, then it's a normal repair. So it comes down to just like any other repair, was it something that the tenant caused, or was it just that's when we caught it in the timing?
Yes. Um, can we talk about paint?
Oh, I love talking about paint.
So the paint is worn out. It's got nail holes. It's got touch up from previous move in, move outs, kids, pets. And let's say that the tenant painted a room neon green, but it's time to paint. Does it matter if that was inspected and not called out?
So we've got a couple of different things going on there. So for one, there is a normal lifespan of paint, and it's much shorter than it is in our primary homes.
Yeah.
And everybody lives a little bit differently. So, we end up with a house that has multiple nail holes because people had different pictures in different places. One tenant had kids, one had a dog, whatever they're moving furniture in and out during their normal moves during our turnovers.
Yes.
We do touch up paint in between when we can, if it's small, if the paint's available, if we can match it, all of those things, and if it makes sense to do
Right.
so. It's not going to make it look worse. Um, However, paint has a lifespan just like anything else. So, every 5 to 7 years, that property is going to need to be painted, top to bottom. And that's
Yeah.
going to be a large expense.
Yes.
Um, but it's not an expense of the tenant necessarily. Now, if the tenant did some damages to the walls, um, they mounted in anything, I consider anything larger than a dime or a penny to
Mhm.
be a damage. So this includes the new wall mounted TVs. If they don't want to leave their wall mount, or they only leave part of the wall mount and I've got to remove a wall mount,
Yes.
then they're going to have to, the tenant is going to have to pay to have that wall repaired and
Yes.
painted. um,
Okay.
when it's prudent, sometimes I can get away with just painting a wall. I've had properties where maybe a sofa is, so that wall got more things hung above it and it had more handprints, more rub marks, more. And sometimes I don't have to paint the whole room. We can just paint that wall if the rest of the walls look good. But that's going to be an owner expense because in the state of Florida, the judges really consider that as upkeep maintenance for your
Okay.
property. Now, in the situation where a tenant has painted something an awful color, it does make a difference if we have to go to court whether or not we have allowed that non-compliance. The lease says that they can't do anything to the house
Mhm.
without written permission. And sometimes we have tenants that ask to paint. And typically, how we handle that is we ask them to give us a color, sheen, and brand of paint that they want to use. We can get that approved with the owner. And if it's something they're really attached, they want the neon green room. The son has always dreamed of having a wall in his room that's neon green. He's really into, I don't know, gaming or something that is a big hit for. We've got a couple of other ways that we can handle that, which include Sherwin-Williams sells a peel and stick wallpaper,
Yes.
even in just solid colors that comes off very clean, not like the old contact paper. We can also authorize the tenant to paint it with a deposit to paint it back. Again, that is going to be by written agreement. If we walk into an inspection and we find out that the tenant has done this without authorization, we will have to write a letter and tell them, hey, you have done this and it's unauthorized. And once we catch it, we're going to sign an agreement that says, okay, you understand you have to paint this back.
Yeah.
If you just let it go and you don't say anything, then you can't really charge the tenant. You could. Now, let me put a caveat there. There's a difference between people are like, well, I can too. Well, maybe you physically could charge the tenant for it, but if they object, there is a process that we're going to talk about in just a second. And
Mhm.
if they object, you may get a bunch of you may end up like cutting off your leg,
Mhm.
because if you go in front of a judge and you've got one thing on there that you can't support, they're really going to dive deep into everything else that you charge them and why you charge them for it. And you may end up not getting any money at all. So, everything that we recommend when we're doing a security deposit dispute, if you think, well, why didn't they charge that? It was probably because it was something that we didn't feel that we could stand in front of a judge and support.
Yes. And that's important.
Yes. And that doesn't keep you as the owner from going after the tenant in small claims court. You could, this is only in reference to how we handle the security deposit because there's a legal process for that security deposit. So if you want to go separately and file a claim for something else that you feel that you should have gotten reimbursed for, we advise our clients, we would be glad to either point them in the direction of a good real estate attorney or let them know what that process is.
Lots of good information.
All right, Charlotte, my
Yes.
inspection is complete, right? I've gotten all my pictures, I've got my videos, I've got my written notes. So now what? We just keep their deposit because it wasn't clean and there were a couple of holes in the walls. And so I'm just going to take their deposit and move on, right?
Negative. I wish it were that easy. No, we're going to go back to the office. There's several steps after that. We need to go in and take a look at our previous inspections, our their PSA, their property status agreement, what they notated was wrong with the property when they moved in. And if that is still, if that's on my list of things, then I can't charge them for those things. Um, I look at previous work orders, um, their move-in inspection, my move-in inspection, um, tenant, pre-tenant photos and pre-tenant videos to compare what the property looks like now compared to back then. Maybe it's just a year, maybe it's been 2 years. Um, and then from there, I start my work orders. I start work orders for damages. And sometimes I'll put separate work orders in for items that just need to be taken care of to maintain the property. Um,
So this is important. So you actually go back and compare that. I mean, don't you know your properties? Don't you, isn't your memory sufficient to let you know what that property, what condition it was in when you passed it over?
Overall, I know what condition, but 2 years I've had this tenant in there. 2 years ago, I don't remember what I had for dinner last night. I don't remember. I don't remember if that scratch was there 2 years ago. So that's why we do these videos and these pictures. It's become more and more important as I've been in the business. Every year, I find it to be more and more beneficial to have all of this backup. Um, and it helps, to decipher. I don't have to guess.
And we've had even some owners in the past
Yes,
that have come back
forgotten.
and forgotten what their house looked like. And
Yes.
and what are some of the craziest? Because I've got my favorite. So what are some of the craziest things owners have told you?
My favorite has to be that the tile color is different.
That was on my top 10 list, that
Yes.
we changed the color of the
Of the,
grout throughout
in the
their house.
tiles. Yes, throughout their house. And we went back to even look at their MLS pictures when they bought their property and compared, and it's the exact same. But that's what memory does. Like if you lived in your property and you don't remember, I can't remember exactly all the nicks and damages or not damaged from a year to 2 years ago.
I think it was the same couple that also said, why would they have painted the house these hideous colors?
Yes,
And we had been asking them to paint for 10 years,
yes,
and they had not painted. And again, it was the same color as it was when they purchased it, which was a very odd mixture of oranges and browns and
yes.
reds and
Very out of date.
dark and out of date.
Yeah,
And we were told that we had done that, and
yes,
why would we paint such hideous colors? And
yeah.
that was what colors do we usually paint, Charlotte?
Neutral, very neutral. That way it appeals to everybody and everybody's decor fits.
So I want everybody to be aware, we do not paint houses brown or orange or red. If it's already that color, we may do touch up in that color if the paint's available. But
Yes.
those would not be the colors that we would choose if we were painting a rental.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
all right, so we got our work orders in. Now what
Mhm.
do we have to wait for?
Now I'm waiting for my vendors to send me invoices for when they have completed all of the work orders and the items that are needed to do my intent letter.
Gotcha. Okay. And then I want to talk a little bit about the proration process because I get this question a lot.
Yes.
Um, and I had an owner at one point, and they wanted to fuss with me about their carpet because the carpet was over 20 years old, but it was white and had been in pristine shape. And they didn't want people to wear shoes in the house. And they wanted me to charge the next tenant for all new carpet because the carpet was no longer pristine. And I had to tell them that yes, if I charged the tenant 100% of the value of the carpet, we would still be deducting $0. And they looked at me kind of miffed. And I had to explain the how I arrived at that. So there, everything in a house has a life. And so for carpet, it's 5 to 7 years. Obviously, better carpet lasts longer. Cheaper carpet lasts, 5 years or on
Yes.
the lesser end. So, how we come up with a price for what that person owes is first you have to depreciate it because you've already depreciated it on your taxes. You take a yearly depreciation on your taxes for the things in the home for the lifespan of those things. So, you've already received your benefit from that. Um, so we have to calculate what that means to the tenant. So say we have a room of carpet and they damaged it so bad it's got pet urine or whatever the case may be, and we've got to replace the entire carpet. It's going to cost us $500. And the carpet has a lifespan of 5 years. We're 2 full years into it. So we would take that $500 and divide it by the 5 years, and so it's $100 a year. So if we're already in it for 2 years, that means there's $300 worth of life left in that carpet. So although it's going to cost you as an owner $500 to replace that carpet, you get to set that clock again. So they're only getting discounted the depreciated value, but we can't charge them the whole cost of the new carpet, even though we're having to replace that whole carpet. In the same way, we also use this when we're not going to um, necessarily replace something. Same scenario, same bedroom of carpet, $500, 5 years, and
Mhm.
they've left some spots, some stains. Maybe a teenage daughter spilled some nail polish. And we're not going to replace the whole carpet because of it, but we know that it has reduced the life. That if that were done 5 times, and there
Mhm.
were 5 different areas of that, we would have had to have replaced the whole carpet. So we do the same, we go through that same process and go, okay, well, that knocked a year off the life of that. So now that tenant owes us $100. And that's a proration, and not in an aspect of not replacing the carpet. We do the same thing when we get like dents on a refrigerator or on an appliance, because we're not going to replace an entire refrigerator because there's a dent,
Yeah.
that doesn't damage the function, but it definitely has a value.
Mhm.
So we typically use the proration method for that.
Nice.
So, how do we do our intent to claim? What is an intent to claim?
Intent to claim is, it's our legal letter to the tenant stating how much of their security deposit we're going to place a claim on, and for what. What is the damages listed, um, and we do that by certified mail.
And why can't we just take the money? I mean, they obviously owe it. We've gone through, we've got our invoices. Um, what is the
There is a legal process, that we have, if I'm not withholding anything, let's say that they left the property in perfect condition, they did all the things we asked. I'm not going to place a claim on a security deposit. We have 15 days to return their security deposit. If I am uh, making a claim on their security deposit, I have 30 days to gather all of my information, get my invoices, and put all that together in a letter of intent, certified mail, send that to them. Once they've received it, they have 15 days to respond. This is the legal process that we have to follow. Can't go outside of that.
and that's in
Um,
Florida statutes, correct?
yes, that's Florida statute, which is listed on our intent, what the statutes, say and the process. For the tenant to have, that information at their hands as well. Um, if no response, then we withhold the funds, and return what's remaining.
And then what's the process if they do respond? Are there ever situations where we're wrong, or somebody has a reasonable argument about why something occurred?
Absolutely. If they can prove, or not even just prove, but, proof is great. Or they can just, come back and say, I feel that I took care of that the best of that I could because, um, you know, what's an example, Dawn, of something?
So, recently we had a property that we charged them for missing smoke detectors,
Yes, yes.
and
And we realized that, um, they were missing previously. One was missing previously, and then I believe, if this is correct, and then we also learned there's a new law in Florida that we have to have smoke detectors in every bedroom now. So those were missing, so that would lean on the owner. That's our own responsibility. Um, so we listen, we listen to objections. We don't have a lot of objections because we're thorough. But when we do, um, we listen and we take into account and we try to, and we negotiate somewhat.
Yeah. Yeah. If they like that, where they said,
Yes,
hey, no, these were,
yes,
you increase the number of smoke
of,
detectors, plus
yes,
the other one that you charged me for wasn't actually there
when
when
I
you,
was there. Yes,
um, so, and I guess originally we didn't have a picture of that, but we did end up finding
we
another
did.
picture
Yes.
from before that showed that
Yeah,
that one
and
was in
we
fact missing.
when I do my, and you as well, when we come back and because I don't want to withhold something from a tenant that's wrong. So I do a lot of digging and a lot of research, but I'm human as well. And I'm gonna miss stuff. Yeah, I missed that picture. And it took some time to find it.
Which is
So
also why we send all of that proof to the tenant, right? That
yes,
we get very few people that argue with us about whether the damages or dirt or grass was the way it was, because we do have time date stamped photos,
yes,
and we send them those along with the actual invoices from the
yes,
vendors.
right. Yeah, so
Um,
there's no guessing, there's no, you know, well, why did this vendor charge this amount? You have their invoice, that's what it cost.
So, but from the owner's point of view, so all of this is going on in the background. Let's get back to
Yes,
the owner's point of view. So, your
yes,
tenant is moving out, your new tenant moves in, you're expecting to get a check. You were told that, once the new tenant moves in, your reserve would go back down, and you get your first payment, and holy moly, it's $200,
yes,
and you are freaking out because you've got a new tenant. You were expecting some money, and all of the rest of that stuff should have come out of the previous tenant security deposit.
yes.
What causes that phenomenon?
Well, as we were talking about the the response time and the time that Florida statute, how many, I've got 30 days to hold the funds. They have 15 days to respond. There's 45 days. If there's any time in there, if there's 5 days it took for them to get the certified mail, we get receipt of that. So now we're at 50 days. Um, all of the vendors and all of the utilities, the security, the deposits on utilities, the claim is still sitting there because we cannot process that until that 50 days or 60 days that we've done all of the things that are required, then we can release those funds. Well, in the meantime, anything that came in had to pay those vendors, and that money's sitting there waiting to be processed to you. But we can't do that until it's at the correct time.
And why
So
don't we just make our vendors wait?
because we want to keep the vendors happy. We have really good vendors. They're doing these jobs for us, immediately so that we can make our claim as soon as possible. And they have to be paid.
And our relationships with our vendors are important, right? We have
Very,
vendors than most other property management companies. I
yes,
have literally had multiple vendors tell me I won't work with other property management companies
yes,
because they do have the vendor's going to wait. If it takes me 60 days to get the money, they've got to wait for 60 days.
yes.
Well, that vendor still has to pay their employees and their taxes and.
Yes,
they've got expenses involved, materials that they've purchased for that project. And
exactly.
so, to be able to keep the very best vendors,
Mhm.
we found that the most important thing to the vendors
It's to
was to
get
get
paid.
paid on time.
Yes. Yes,
In most cases, they are already agreeing to let us hold it until the next pay period for an owner.
yes,
They're already giving us some flexibility there. Most of them don't require payment on, upon service,
yes,
but we do need to get them paid within a reasonable amount of time,
yeah,
um, or else we won't be able to have the best vendors with the best prices. Uh,
yes.
so all of that to say, now, but the owner is obviously going to get all of that money back, right?
Not necessarily, like we talked about. There's my work orders for damages. But then I put in work orders that are needed just as an overall maintenance of the home. Um, and that's part of the claim, but it, that's going to be deducted from the owner, at that point.
So like
Um,
those extra smoke detectors, or
yeah,
we
yes,
needed some window screens, or the
yeah,
tree trimming.
yes, yeah. If the tree is too high, or a bush is too high for a tenant to take care of. Um, or there's some popcorn missing from the ceiling. That's not a damage necessarily. Um, that could be from moisture or from, you know, whatever the case may be. If we determine that's not a tenant damage, that's something we need to take care of. That's an owner expense.
For the burner on the stove that we talked about. So
Yes,
we're
yes,
catching all of those things, and we're taking care of all of those during that
yes,
same time period.
yes, yes. And we're dividing them up, as they should be. So it's it gets time consuming, and um but
But we get compensated for that, right? Like we get extra money to do these multiple inspections and
no,
sorting through all of this. And
not that I'm aware. My paycheck stayed the same.
and that one actually is really more for the tenants than it is for the owners. There are some
Yes,
companies that charge per inspection. We don't do that. And after the work is done, we're going to go back and look at it again to make sure that everything is, before a new tenant moves in, we go through the whole process again, even
yes,
though we just went through the property, looked at everything, put in all of our work orders, and had all of the work done. Now our tenant's going to move in, and we do a whole new set of move-in condition photos and making sure that everything is right in the property for our new tenant.
yes.
Um, and also, maybe the last thing is, um, why is it important for us to do this, the updating and stuff between tenants? So, there's going to be some things, we often talk about, sometimes we have to recommend to an owner, like, okay, that brass candelabra dining room fixture is so 1980s, that it no longer fits with the home. And they're like, but it works. Um, why is it important for them to continue to do some of those updates, as we turn over tenants?
Um, well, for tenants, they're looking at your property compared to, the one in the next neighborhood, but the one in the next neighborhood's updated. Um, you know, people want updated, they want fresh paint, they want the nice appliances. And we're not saying to go in and just do an overhaul of your whole property, but little things are important to keep your prospects happy and engaged in your property and want to rent your property. Um, and also not just decorative, but just overall care of your property. So that prospects come in and they say, oh, this owner really takes care of their property. I want to live here.
Mhm. And it makes a
That's
difference in
my,
how they keep
that's
their home.
my, that's my opinion. Um,
Well, and I find that it's easier considering we do sales as well. I find that it's
yes,
easier when that owner decides that it's time for them to liquidate their property, and
yep,
liquidate that asset if
yes,
we have been managing it in a manner and keeping it
yes,
up to date somewhat,
right,
keeping the fresh, the fresh paint every 5 to 7 years. Now, I know there are some asset owners out there that buy one, they overhaul it one time, and then they want to drive it into the dirt. Like they
yes,
don't want to fix anything unless it's, but that's not our management style, correct?
right. We're asset managers. We're taking care of your highest asset that you probably have. Um, and so that when it is time to uh, sell or whatever you decide, it's in its prime, best shape for that. And you're going to get the most for your money.
And there's nothing wrong with people that never want to touch anything, and that's just not necessarily our management style because our goal is twofold. Since our goal goes toward overall wealth management and
Yes,
helping create the generational wealth through property ownership, we don't just care about the immediate cash flow. It's the cash flow plus the growth of equity plus the appreciation. And the
yes,
appreciation is really going to depend on how well maintained that home has been. If
yes,
all the systems have been maintained, and adequate replacement of water heaters and HVAC systems and roofing systems, and then, the sticky likability of, do you walk in and everything's straight out of 1970 Harvest Gold, or do you walk in and feel like it's a more modern, up-to-date home, and that
yes.
and that has a intangible value to it.
Well, and plus, Dawn, if you're doing it over the years or over a time span, and you're doing it little by little, instead of you go in and you're like, oh my gosh, my house is 20 years in the, past the time, then you're putting, mega bucks out at one time. Um, that it just makes sense, to do it over time and
It
as an
makes
investment.
it makes me cry, and sometimes the problems when not taken care of impound themselves. So I know you've seen me take over a couple of portfolios, recently, that if inspections had been done by the previous management company and they had done the things necessary. For example, one of them was stucco, and there were cracks in the stucco. And had they been caught when they were small cracks, we would have been able to seal the stucco cracks, which is a pretty normal practice,
Yeah,
and been able to move forward. However, these cracks had continued to grow to the point where they were gaping, and now there was water inside of the wall and mold growing, thank goodness, in the garage. But there was mold growing on the drywall on the inside of the garage from something that a few $100s worth of preventative maintenance turned
yeah,
into a $30,000 wall rebuild.
yes,
So, making sure that we're taking care of not just the cosmetic things, but also,
yes,
and it takes a lot of trust because yes, we're going to ask you to spend some money during these inspections and during these turnovers, and
yeah.
you may not always understand why, but you know, Charlotte, do we ever spend money that we don't need to spend? I mean, not personally, because I spend a lot of money personally that I don't need.
Me
Um,
too.
but when we're a
Marshalls
fiduciary,
and TJ Maxx.
oh my goodness.
But no, not for an investor or an owner. We're we're spending um to keep their property at its best.
Doesn't necessarily mean the cheapest, right? Because
Yeah,
sometimes we found cheap is not
it's
good.
not good because, and yeah, we've tried the cheap. And it's cost us in the long run, many times.
So we do have some owners that are like, okay, well, get me three bids. I want to go with the cheapest one. And how do we advise those folks?
Um, we have, we have many vendors and we've used them over the years. We've gotten to know what they're really great at and what they're not great at. So my vendor that may want to quote your paint at the cheapest, I know he is not going to do the quality that this person over here that's maybe $800 more. It's worth that $800 to spend because you're going to tell, you're going to be able to tell that paint job.
And that
Um,
handyman or person may be in our vendor list because they're great at
and
building fences
yes, but
or
they want to do
installing
paint.
hardwood floors.
Yes, they want to paint, but they're not good at it.
Yeah.
And so we've learned by trying them out, and they, if it's a fail, it's a fail. And so when we advise an owner, we know which one is, not necessarily, and if they are the cheapest and we know they're great, then we winner. But if not, and we say not, then, it's a trust thing again, but sometimes you got to trust what we've learned already.
Because we can almost always find somebody cheaper, right? If you look around,
Yeah,
but are they going to show up? Are they
right.
licensed and insured? Are they
Yes,
going to
yeah,
leave in the middle of the job?
right. You've
Um,
paid them partial or,
yeah, hey,
yeah.
I've done that on some of my own investment properties. I had one that was sending me pictures and I invested $21,000 just to find out that he pretty much hadn't done anything and left the
Um,
job middle way. He had replaced the roof, and this was a full contractor, and
wow.
he had replaced the roof and removed a tree that was already down. It was down on some power lines. But I was $21,000 into a $28,000 bid that included the interior rehab of the house,
Mm,
which was never touched.
no,
And basically, the judge said, I can't put a price on, I don't know, maybe that last $7,000 was the interior part. Like, that's
yeah,
it. Basically, there wasn't a way to recoup my money. So,
yes,
it's important. It's important to make sure that we're using vendors that are trusted and reliable,
yes,
and
yeah,
um, we we
absolutely,
we know which ones are good at what and who's going to be trustworthy.
yes.
And hey, if we get a new vendor that does a great job, like that's awesome too. So
Hmm.
we welcome our owners if they've had really great experiences with somebody, but um, kind of a little off point. But sometimes people fall off of our vendor list. Maybe this was your preferred vendor. A local AC company here was great, was my preferred vendor for any of my properties that didn't have a preferred vendor.
Yeah,
And then they got bought out by a corporate franchise and they are no longer a local company and they're no longer responsive to other local companies like they once were before. And now they try to upcharge every single service call. So they are required by their management to try to sell you something while they're there, whether you need it or not. So they're no longer on my preferred vendor list. So they were a great vendor, but they're not anymore. So
yeah,
sometimes owners are like, well, why didn't you use my vendor? Well, there's a reason.
yes.
All right. Anything you want to say in parting, Charlotte?
Just appreciative of our owners.
I love them.
Yep,
Hope they buy more properties, want to help them buy more properties.
yes,
Um,
absolutely.
so we love what we do.
Yep.
Um, all right. Thank you guys, and we will see you again next time.